fund for the dispersion of that funding. So maybe just a little bit about Trinity before I talk about Tangent. So everybody's probably familiar with Trinity, the highest ranking university in Ireland. 430 years, we're the oldest university here as well. But maybe people don't know that we're the #1 university in Europe for student entrepreneurship. So we're very much kind of like right in the heart of innovation and that entrepreneurial mindset as well. We deliver programs that I guess cater for, if you look around the floor today, you'll see everywhere the journey of an idea. So people come here, students, but also the outside world come here with challenges. And actually, symbolically, it's really interesting. When this building, it's the newest building in Trinity, and when it was being built, it had been recognised and it had been said that Trinity had turned its back on Pearse Street. So Trinity can be a bit intimidating in terms of the walls. It's in the city centre, it's a walled kind of like university. So the doorway into this building is actually the first doorway that's been built into Trinity in over 100 years from the Pearse Street entrance. And the idea is when you walk into the building, Tangent is the first unit, if you want, that you can come into, and it's to make Trinity more porous. So it's to welcome and bring in the challenges of the world. So yesterday we ran a creative solving problem workshop, and it is to kind of like, it's like, what are the problems? But also to empower people to provide education, to develop the capability for for those solutions as well. We have 3 streams. I'm just going to talk about the journey for a second, the journey of an idea. So we do have 3 streams. Our engagement, Anya sitting back there. It's all about inspiring and exciting and kind of like demonstrating that there is a world of opportunity out there, despite the challenges that we might have, that there's solutions to those challenges. And last night's a really, really wonderful example. We run a postgraduate in climate entrepreneurship, and Mary Robinson, a UN and climate elder, came and gave a guest lecture. So her face was on that screen, so she was very present. But it was just an example of how we can bring in kind of like really, really interesting people to inspire and excite. On our education programs, we have multiple education programs, undergraduates, postgraduates, and lots of professional development programs. And I know some of you experienced professional development masterclasses yesterday. And then finally, entrepreneurship. The entrepreneurship stream is about taking those ideas, taking individuals, students and early stage startups and turning those ideas into impact. So we have 6 accelerators, and actually the Innovation Fund is very similar to, I guess, in structure and composition to what our engagement or what our entrepreneurship activities look like. So now I just want to say a few words about the Public Service Innovation Fund. Traditionally and unfairly, there probably has been a perception of a lack of flexibility or unwillingness to embrace change in the public service. And we know that in the past, this might have been true, not because there are not incredible people in the public service, but because in the past, maybe there's not been support from leadership. And I also think the risk appetite has been very low. People's capacity maybe hasn't been developed or systems in place to ignite the imagination and to harness the incredible motivation that exists in the public service. However, last year I did have the privilege of chairing the selection committee for the PSIF, and myself and the other panellists were struck by the desire, perseverance and the determination of the proposals to address the societal issues that exist and solutions the public service employees put forward for these challenges. So in total there was 17 recipients of public service innovation funding in 2022, amounting to €725,000. The success followed a highly competitive selection process of 83 applications across 3 categories: digital transformation, citizen-centric innovation and green and sustainable initiatives. The Innovation Fund is now an established medium for realising transformation across the public service, and I absolutely encourage everybody working in the public service to apply. All you need to do, if you recognise a problem and you have a possible solution, get the application started. And I see this year there's a whole component around design thinking and service design in the application, which is great to see because this is a core competency on all our programmes in Tangent. And if anybody is interested in programmes, Anya, as I said, is back there. She's happy to answer questions, as well as Shay, our amazing team. Finally, congratulations to all the team involved and to the department for making this possible and making it happen. It's absolutely fantastic to see this initiative happening. And remember, as one of Trinity's greatest alum, Samuel Beckett, has said, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. This is perseverance, the word of the week, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken, and thank you very much to the Tangent team for hosting us today. Fantastic, as well as yesterday, to have had a session for Innovation Week. Yesterday, there was also a very inspiring young student from Romania, and she was working on a project that translated government documents more effectively or more articulately into other languages. And she said something quite profound in that she had so much passion, but she didn't have the resource, and I might be slightly misphrasing that. But it seems to me that my experience working with the fund, that there is an abundance of passion, and the fund hopefully acts as the resource that they need to get it over the line. So this year, for 2023, we're back. Our fund will amount to €750,000 for those projects ranging between 25 and 60,000. The fund aligns with the Making Innovation Real strategy, which is the public service innovation strategy. Since 2019, its amount at €2.8 million has supported 87 diverse projects. Now, those just seem like very high numbers, but if you break that down, that's €2.7 million given to public servants, their experience, their drive to better service, to provide better service for the Irish public. There's been a variety of solutions developed, as evidenced by our panel later today. We are going to be joined by Aisling Curley from the Department of Education, Caitríona Gleeson for Women for Election, Dr. Jim Garrihy from Maynooth University, and Carmel from Monaghan County Council. We'll also be joined by Marianne Cassidy, the Head of Public Service Transformation, Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, who has experienced both sides of the funds as a applicant, a recipient as well now, and her department leads out on driving transformation across public service. But first of all, we are very delighted to welcome arguably one of the biggest champions of innovation, and certainly the Innovation Fund over the past few years, Minister of State Ossian Smyth. So I'd like to formally welcome him to the stage to formally launch the fund for 2023. Yeah, turn it on there. Perfect. Just the switch. There we go. Upwards. Perfect.
Technology. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Eoin. So I work in DEEPR. I'm the Minister of State responsible for e-government, and it's my pleasure to launch this Public Service Innovation Fund. So for you, what does it mean? What's it all about? So I'm just going to tell you something about it and see so that you can make your decision about if it's something that you want to go for. So the Public Service Innovation Fund provides money, provides funding for somebody who's working in the public sector, who has an idea and also has the enthusiasm and the drive to carry it out, to do something innovative that's going to improve the way that they work and give a better service, crucially, to the public. So that's what our idea is. There is about €750,000 available, and we expect to fund maybe 15 projects, roughly €50,000 each, or up to €60,000 a piece. So that's the kind of level of funding we're talking about. So just to give you an idea of what happened, the kind of projects that we funded this year, just to make it a bit more concrete, we funded, for example, a project where a bottle bank found that they were regularly going around to collect their bottles, but sometimes it would be empty, sometimes it had been overflowing for days. So they put in a sensor so they could tell when the bottle bank was filling up, and they could send the trucks out early to go to the right places and efficiently use the time. And they could, by doing that, they could reduce the amount of unnecessary journeys and the amount of wasted time and fuel and so on. So that's an example. Another group in Donegal, I believe, developed a kind of compost that would suppress Japanese knotweed, which, if you're working in the public sector, often is the kind of enemy of large infrastructure projects. I remember working in Dunleary, and we were trying to build a social housing project, and at some point we found it was all infested with knotweed, and everything got held up for months. And a smartphone app was developed in the medical sector, which allowed people with chronic illness to report into their doctors, to their medical practitioner, and say how they were getting on. And that meant that if you had that chronic illness, you could avoid unnecessarily having to go into hospital. You wouldn't have to regularly go in and take up everybody's time. But when you were needed, when you did have the symptoms that meant that you had to be seen, you did get seen. So it was a system that meant that it was better for the patients and better for the doctors. Also earlier this year, I went to visit Dublin City Council with Philip and Chris Kiernan, and I went to see a drone project. And this is the idea of people in the public sector using drones for different purposes. So, for example, you're a firefighter. You think it would be useful to have a drone so you could investigate a fire in a building without putting your life at risk. Or perhaps you are investigating illegal dumping and you use drones to go over the wall and see if an illegal dump is operating. And earlier this year I passed a law that allows that to be done without breaking the privacy laws. So that was an example of very practical use of technology, which for the people involved, like what I noticed when I went out to Dublin City Council was just real excitement about it, the use of this very dramatic flying technology, a lot of different purposes that the technology was being used for. So things that were being developed could be transferred to other sections of the council. There were maybe 5 or 6 sections of the council using drones for different purposes, and then they were making available to other parts of government the things that they had discovered so that they could be copied. So something that we're trying to do, and when you're thinking about applying for this, if you can think about whether the innovation that you have in mind could be scaled to other areas. Could it be something that could be duplicated and used in another section of government? Or if it works in your office, in your department, could it be used across the country? So anything that can scale to a larger degree is the kind of project that we'd like to support. We'd also like to see any project, it's absolutely critical that the projects have a direct effect on the citizen. So the citizen should notice that whatever they're doing has greatly improved, that they're getting a better service, and it's not just that it's making life easier for the person who's in the public sector in that job. I went out to UCD earlier this year. I met with Rachel Farrell, who is running a cybersecurity course for people aged 13 to 16. So you're a secondary school student and you need to learn the skills to protect yourself from being hacked or having your data stolen or your identity hacked or whatever. And what I saw there was Rachel is absolutely full of enthusiasm. She gets on really well with the children. She really interacts very well. She put a lot of effort into it. And then she got a lot back out of it when she saw the results coming in. And with her team, she's developed something that we're going to probably be able to roll out all around the country now. So that's an example of something. And I guess the critical success factor there was just the will and the enthusiasm and the wish to do it. So, in a way, we're asking a lot from somebody in the public sector because we're saying, can you come up with an innovative idea? And yes, we'll give you some funding, but you're going to have to put in all this work to deploy it, and yet you only get paid the same amount of money. So what is the incentive for doing this? And I suppose the incentive is that you get the satisfaction of seeing that you've developed something new that makes life better, not just for you and your colleagues, but for the people who are using your services. But also you learn this new technology. That gives you skills that can either allow you to be promoted, to move somewhere else within the public sector, or even to move to the private sector. So it is something that allows your job to become more meaningful and interesting. And I think that's something I've really noticed all around, is anybody involved in these schemes who has the aptitude for it, it's something that can be really fulfilling. So if you want to apply for one of these grants for next year, it's ops.gov.ie. And I just want to thank Ken Finnegan from Tangent. Thank you very much for hosting us in this lovely building here today. And thank you very much, Philip McGrath and Chris Kiernan and everybody on the delivery team for the work that you've done on this project. I think you've done very well the last few years, and I think it's really developing into something very interesting. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Minister, do you have time to join us for a few questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time today. As I said, Champion of Innovation is a big title.
Okay, well, you gave me that title.
Not self-imposed, I apologise. Yeah, so you spoke a little bit about the 2 projects that you visited earlier, cyber resilience education primary and post-primary at school in Ireland, accelerating the potential for drones for local government by Smart Dublin. What were some of your key takeaways when you visited these and saw these projects in action?
Well, really, I think the main thing is I saw the enthusiasm that the people involved had to follow through on what they were doing. And, the number one factor for success in any walk of life is persistence. And it's the ability to, try something out, and then when it doesn't work, You don't walk away. It's how you react when you fail, really. So when you don't manage the first time, is your reaction to say, that's it, it's not for me, I hate this, I'm not that kind of person? Or do you go to bed and then come back in the next day and say, I'm going to try again? And if you keep trying, if you have the persistence, that's the key factor for success. So I saw people who would go the extra mile, who would try and try again, who would react to their own failures by just putting in, by stepping back for a while first and then moving forward again, and who really, people who needed a meaningful job, who needed something where they would make a change and they got fulfillment from the fact that they would see the world improving. And the world could improve because you're seeing young children who have learned something new and are excited by it, or the world has changed because you were able to put out a fire without putting people's lives at risk, or you were able to catch people who are illegal dumping, or whatever it is. You were able to suppress Japanese knotweed in an environmentally friendly way, but whatever it is, and you see that you've changed something and you've built something, and that the world's better. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and even the sheer variety and wide breadth of projects that you can see alone, and very meaningful too. I mean, even that day in UCD, it was trying to encourage young girls to consider a career in STEM, which historically has not certainly done enough to appeal to young girls. So would you agree that innovation is meaningful in a different way to being impactful?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons to get girls involved in STEM, and particularly in cybersecurity, which is my area, was that it's not just for the sake of equality, it's that you get a better team when you get people from different perspectives on the team. So you've got a weak team if it's all people of the same age, same gender, same background, same education. You want a mix of everything, so they've all got the different perspectives, and you get I mean, diversity is strength, basically. So if you're not getting girls and young women moving into cybersecurity, we had to get in there early, and we need to give them role models. We need to recruit people who are working in that area, who are women in that area, and then go to girls' schools and just get and of course they can do it. Of course, when you push hard enough, you get them back.
No, absolutely, and I think UCD that day proved that there's certainly not a shortage of those role models, no doubt, working in cybersecurity area. Absolutely, and I think innovation, particularly now, and it's going to be one of the categories for this year, and again we have the launch of the service design principles coming up at the end of the week. There's certainly been a marked shift towards kind of citizen-centric approach in how we deliver services and innovation in the public sector. Do you think that a citizen-centric approach in innovation is essential to delivering in the public service?
I think we're now living in a world where people are used to dealing with, the high-tech companies, whether they're shopping online or they're doing their banking online or their social life online, and they're used to a really friendly interface, a really immediate and gratifying experience, and they would expect the same from their government. And we need to keep up with that, really, and we need to engage people. And there's although there's the part of the strength of the civil service is the tradition, and the strength of institutions is that, in one way, is their unchangingness. But at the same time, we also need to progress, and we need to keep up. So making sure that we are putting ourselves, empathizing properly, putting ourselves in the shoes of somebody who's trying to use the service, perhaps somebody who is an immigrant or somebody who's not an expert in that area, who doesn't know all the civil service internals, and try and just make it as easy and as engaging and as pleasant as possible.
No, absolutely. I think that's central to any service that the government should offer, always placing the end user at the heart of everything that we do. And I think there's a real shift in that in public policy in the last number of years, and now we're actioning it now kind of more recently. So absolutely. And finally, Minister, I know I've taken enough of your time already, but again, kind of going back to the projects that you've seen, the impact, the meaningful innovation. How important do you think it is to listen and encourage those working in the public sector to innovate?
I think we need to give people permission to fail, basically. We need to allow people to do something and not come down on them like a ton of bricks when the trial didn't work out. We need to appreciate that if you try something out and it doesn't work out in the way that you hoped, you're still stronger because you've learned something, and you've developed skills, you understand the problem better, and then when you come in the second time, the nature of design is that the first approach almost never works, right? It's iterative. You try again, you try again. And you know, one thing with the public sector is there are so many different areas being covered. I know you've got a background in the Garrihy, I believe, you know, and I think Chris was in the Defence Forces. So people are coming from all those different sections and they've got different skills. And I think that actually can be a real strength for the public sector. I want people to be able to, I think, to innovate just as they would in any other organisation. I want them to feel that they have the permission to try things out, to use new technologies, and to try things even if they don't work.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the...
First time.
We'll get it right the second. I think that's probably one of the central ethos of even the likes of the innovation team, that you have kind of everyone from different backgrounds kind of coming together with their own perspective and their own experience to try and guide kind of effective innovation and drive it forward in a progressive way that responds to the needs of everyone that we work for. So thank you very much for your time this morning, Minister. Really appreciate you coming to launch. And now that you have an imposed title of Champion of the Innovation Fund, I'm sure we will be pulling you in for many more events.
Okay, and I want to thanks, Eoin. I wish you all the best in your MC career in the future. I know Graham Norton is interviewing Bono and Taylor Swift on Friday, so you might want to look at that for some tips.
Chris Kieran got your ear before this conversation, I'll tell you. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us.
Thank you.
While we hand over, we have a video we're going to play, testimonials to the Innovation Fund. So stick with us, folks, as we recalibrate the stage. Thanks very much, Minister.
Thank you.
Eoin has been based here in the beautiful Garrihy since 1991, and over the course of the pandemic, we've really struggled with the fact that we had to close the galleries for a long period of time, and not only that, we actually had to close the site for a while as well. Our resources were really heavily impacted throughout COVID. I found the Public Service Innovation Fund online. We were really happy to come across the fund, and we were delighted to have the opportunity to apply. Innovation to us is really working with artists to look at creative solutions to social problems, and for us, this project really embodied that. We looked at how we could flip the museum inside out and create artistic interventions across the site, really activating it from one day to another. The funding for us was really key. What it provided was the opportunity for us to invest in these really interesting structures. The fund for us really allowed us to look at collaborative partnerships. The fund allowed us to be more ambitious in what we were trying to do. So for us, the fund was really helpful in allowing us to think more ambitiously and to be bold with our programming. I would encourage everyone who has even a kernel of an idea that they think might be of interest to apply. This is a fantastic fund. It's open to so many different types of organisations across the public sector, and certainly there's a really welcoming, helpful team behind the scenes who can help you structure your idea and take it forward to application.
Smart City, we have been applying for the Public Service Innovation Fund for a few years now. This year, we use the Public Service Innovation Fund to fund our project on drones. We call it Accelerating the Condition of Drones for Local Government. I work in the Smart City, that is part of the Smart Urban Initiative, and that initiative is pretty much driving innovation within Dublin City Council and the other Dublin local authorities. Working with innovation, I've learned sometimes all you need is just some first step.
Dublin Fire Brigade successfully applied for Innovation Fund to fund a drone project that looked at 3D modelling for communities and planning. It's seen as a very important piece of how we do communities and planning for the future. Drones improve situational awareness at incidents, and for that reason, they're seen as a project has been really important in building that understanding within the fire service and emergency management in general.
Our public service team was very helpful along the whole way of the project. So it was very straightforward. They were always trying to be available and keen to give your feedback.
Applications for the fund can be found online through the Our Public Service website at ops.gov.ie.
No. So if anyone at home couldn't hear the audio, we'd be sure to send out those videos. They're available on our YouTube channel anyway, but we will be sure to send them out afterward. So, and also can I just say Q&A, folks, we will have a time at the end. So those at home, please use the chat function on WebEx, and we'll be sure to get questions through to the panellists towards the end. So, Marianne Cassidy, Assistant Secretary, Head of Public Service Transformation, probably the busiest person in Ireland during Innovation Week. You've seen the fund from both sides, as an applicant, as a recipient, and now your department leads out on the fund. What can you tell us about the fund kind of going into 2023?
Okay, thanks, Owen. Hi, everyone here and online. Look, the fund, as you've mentioned earlier, it's here to encourage innovative ideas across the public sector. And really, it's a small fund, 25 to 60,000, but having been a recipient in my previous job in the court service, it's quite a significant support when you have an idea or when you're trying to tackle a big issue to get you started and to get the conversation started within the organization. So the emphasis on the fund is about outcome and impact. I think the Minister made it very clear earlier, and you've seen some of the example, and you'll hear more of the example of what's been supported to date. It's really about making a difference to the users, helping us with new ways of working, really trying something new in addressing the very complex problem we're all trying to address within the public sector. We put an emphasis on scalability, transferability, and learning. And learning is important there because with the fund, you have the support of the innovation team, and you heard a lot about Philip, Chris, Eoin, and Colin in the innovation team. That's always at the end of the phone, and Jade, I should say. That's important because you'll get to meet other innovators in other organizations. And what I found is that, you might come in with your idea, you might even be successful with the fund, but the network it gives you help you to build a relationship to way beyond your organization and way beyond the problem that you're trying to address within your organization, and to think of the user journey as a whole. So really encourage you as well to participate.
That's great, and kind of you mentioned your own experience kind of working the courts, and the courts have been some of the most transformative, citizen-centric projects I think that the fund has actually seen and supported. The likes of the jam cards, just a minute to kind of give people a moment who have special needs and need that extra time. More recently, the 360 virtual tour of the courts, which is created to make more of an approachable environment if you're nervous, kind of going to court and you don't know what's going on. What advice, I suppose, would you offer to someone kind of going for the funds, the application, kind of in your own words, having been on that side of it too?
And I'm talking as I'm looking at the innovation team of the courts, who very strategically sat opposite me here and are doing all the work. So, look, I think the learning from it, as I said, was about getting the conversation going. So, with the front line of the court service. So, the way the conversation you have have with the users, the stakeholders, was golden. Because for once we had an opportunity to say to the frontline staff, what are the problems that you're trying to address every day? What are the people telling you is a pain point for them? And including, you know, should they be there in the first instance? You know, should they be presenting at your public counter? And if they're there, do they have all the information they need to avail of the service the best way that will give them the best outcome? So from a fund perspective, it allowed the space to say, okay, we can look at things differently. We can get government support to support those new initiatives, and they don't have to be technology initiative. I know there's been brilliant example. I see Veronica here with the drone project that you've seen in the video, where it's all about harnessing new technology. That's really important. But it's really important as well to look at how, the people that maybe don't have the same level of access to technology, or where the technology is not the main problem. It's the need for a little bit of extra time and not having to disclose every time that the reason why they need a bit of extra time, and develop the capacity of the staff to have those conversations in terms of, you know, in the case of the Just a Minute card, being aware that somebody might need, might want to engage in a slightly different way. So it's innovation is about trying to understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve. And the Innovation Fund gives you that space and the tool and the support to solve that problem.
That's great, and it kind of pivots into kind of the future, I suppose, next. I mean, the categories for 2023, we have citizen support innovation, digital transformation, green and sustainability initiatives, and innovative design of services. So kind of now that you have pivoted away from courts, kind of working in these projects on a day-to-day, to now working kind of on leading out on public service transformation, what can you say that these categories kind of tell us about where Deeper sees the future of public services in Ireland?
Well, we had a really interesting conference on Monday to launch Innovation Week, and some of you might have been at it. For me, innovation, as I said during the week, is the bedrock of transformation, right? We need to develop that innovation mindset in people. We need to act differently. And we had at the conference on Monday, both the Minister for Expenditure and Reform, Michael McGrath, and the Secretary General, David Maloney, saying we don't have a choice but innovate or transform, because our world around us is changing. You know, we have huge population growth. We have a 1% increase in population since the beginning of the year only. We have a society that expects to interact with public service differently in terms of the digital age. Nobody wants to go and post a form and to get back their acknowledgement. Actually, I was speaking to one of the people here in the audience from the Citizen Information Board, saying we're doing a lot of work around those little pain points, but that costs a lot of money and a lot of time, and is a little bit dispiriting for our staff as well, in terms of giving them good sense of worth of what they're there to do. So we have no choice but innovate. So those categories, they're aligned with some of the big challenges we have. Climate is massive. You know, again, if you were there on Monday, you would have heard that you know, the projection of the cost of flood remediation, it was nearly the whole cost. One of the conservative projection for fixing a 1 meter rise in sea level was the entire budget of the country to remediate only. So we have a burning platform, and I know it's become a bit cliche to innovate, and those categories are where we want to push the innovation.
Yeah, I agree with that, and particularly in citizen support in innovation, you kind of mentioned there about value. and worth, and I think it's kind of valuing the perspective of the end user, really, and capturing that early on. And as you said, a lot of even the design principles is an iterative process, so it's not one size fits all. You have to go back, change. What did they think about the first way? Go back, amend, keep going. So is kind of citizen support approach important to you as lead of public service innovation?
Absolutely, and that's where I want to put a lot of our energy. Part of making innovation real was to user-centric innovation. We're launching the first prototype of design principle, as you mentioned, Eoin, earlier on Friday, and that's really trying to learn from the good practice that's happening around academia. Ken mentioned the importance of design thinking in tangent. We're also working with Maynooth on those design principles. They've led on the development of them, and also with public sector organizations that have applied them, and with great transformative success, because at the end of the day, it's all about understanding the problem you're trying to solve, rather than looking at your own organization and the boundary of what you've been set up 100 years ago to do, is to think, well, what are the citizens today main issues, and how can we work collaboratively to solve them? And collaboratively means across organization, and that's something that we look very closely when we look at the Innovation Fund application, as you know, is there cross-organization collaboration, cross-silos organization, collaboration, but also multidisciplinary team. And the very successful innovation, and some of them you'll see today, come from that, the input of the business people, the users, the IT people, working together to really get the change going. And the value is in exchanging across people that we don't really know and understand, and create that shared understanding to tackle those very complex issues I mentioned earlier. So I really encourage you on Friday. I know the event is quite subscribed, but the design principles are going to be available. They're prototype. We're looking for feedback on them, and then there will be an action plan, and that's a call to action here as well today. So you have a permission and hopefully some tool to continue innovate in your own respective sectors and across sectors.
That's great, and even the likes of, as I was saying earlier, you're just getting into these spaces together to share ideas here, because you said you're right, that often enough we go out to the end users, which is fantastic, but often enough there's different pools of people doing the same action, and to kind of reduce duplication across public service, where we can work together to harmonise an approach to deliver the same end product, but having pooled our resources together in the first instance anyway. You're right, and I'll kind of just finish on kind of, you were talking about the conference earlier this week, and you're right, talking about sustainability and kind of climate and the challenges with that, but there's a marked shift towards now embracing emerging tech. I mean, there's now a government ambassador for AI, there's Connecting Government 2030, AI here for good, and it's here for good, permanent and for benefit. So do you think it is important to embed kind of emerging tech within our understanding of innovation to drive progress on policy?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and they're emerging techs are emerging, but they're here to stay. You know, AI can really add value and allow us to redirect our people resources to places where they add even more value. So it's really important to create an understanding of what they can do and the art of the possible. And we will work within Deeper. We work obviously very closely with our colleague on the OGCIO, who have the remit to implement the Connected Government 2030 and to really harness those new technology to make 90% of all public services available online. I mean, that's a huge shift. We're going to talk later. I think Aisling is talking about the robotic process automation, what it can bring and what the outcome, the impact it is for both the service users, but also for staff to be able to redeploy to areas where they can add even more value. There is a lot of work being done at the moment as well in a senior official group around digital inclusion, because we still have a digital divide. So it's both about trying to tackle the digital divide, but also build the capacity of the Irish society and economy to avail of that new opportunities that emerging tech brings and digital transformation bring in a fair and equitable way across society.
Yeah, it's no easy feat to kind of include all these considerations in kind of how you go about innovation. But I think the Innovation Fund at least convinces that there are people championing innovation across the public service, and that I think what I said before, I think it was like there's nothing that harnesses kind of the skills and expertise of existing public servants and gives them the power back. It's the people on the ground who are coming forward with these ideas and these projects and giving the power to them to be able to implement these ideas, because they're the ones who know exactly what's going on the ground. Like, of course, it's great to get all these ideas coming from the top too, but bottom-up approach with this stuff tends to yield better results and kind of more comprehensive kind of policy as well and different ideas. Yeah. So thank you very much, Marianne. I won't keep you any much longer. I won't grill you anymore. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Eoin, and well done on your MC careers. I think it's going very well.
Wow, thank you very much. While we pivot over now and rejig the stage once more for the panel, I believe we have one more video from Ruth Penny, a guest. Yeah, we have a guest here today, as well as someone from the OPW as well, to see the impact of their fund projects. So bear with us, folks, as we line that up. Okay, folks, apologies if you had issues hearing that at home. Those videos are available on our website and social media accounts anyway, so we'll be sure to get them on to you afterwards. So, Public Service Innovation Fund. I think prior to today, if I said to you an RPA project, a project to encourage, support those with previous convictions to get into higher education, a project to encourage more gender parity in politics, and one to centralise local authority resources. If I told you those four, you probably think, what on earth do those things have in common? Well, I'm here to tell you that those four projects were each supported by the Public Service Innovation Fund at one stage or another. So today we welcome to the panel, we have Aisling Curley from the Department of Education, who will be talking to us a little bit about RPA. We've Dr. Jim Garrihy from Maynooth University, who will be discussing a project on unlocking potential, which is encouraging those with previous convictions to gain access to higher education. We have Caitríona Gleeson, CEO of Women for Election, leading out in a project with a government department to foster and encourage gender parity in our political representation. And Carmel, who's no stranger, I think, to these initiatives and these setups, who has led on a very collaborative project to, again, centralise local authority resources in one central pod. So we'll start with Aisling. RPA for pensions received €40,000 in funding in 2020. Aisling, would you like to tell us a little bit about kind of what your project was about when you're ready there?
Thanks, Owen, and thanks for having me here. I'm delighted to share with you our experience and our RPA journey and our innovation project. So I might just give you a small bit of context. So the Department of Education in Athlone is the largest payroll in the state, and we pay 140,000 teachers and non-teaching staff. And all of those people are our customers, and they all have an entitlement to a pension statement. So that's the background, and that's the pressure. So we have a section of about 70 or 80 people in pension unit in Athlone, and really, really good people, fantastic people, no pensions inside out, but we have really bad systems. So the pressure that was on us was we have all of those people, like I said, have an entitlement to a statement. We were meeting about a third of our demand for statements, and we also retire about 1,500 people every year. So pensions are complex. I brought a slide with us, but they're further complex due to the manual nature of our processing systems. So like I said, we've great people in Athlone working in the pension unit, but to get to the stem of a pension, be it a statement or be it to retire somebody, you talk about service history. And when you say it quickly, you think it's the amount of days that you worked in your career, your service. But for teachers, it's quite complex in that they've had different pay agreements over the years. So every day of that service history might have a different hue. It merits a different amount of money. So what we do in Athlone, what the great people in Athlone were doing up to 3 years ago, was to do one service history. It would involve going to 19 paper-based records, going into 4 different databases, and that's about 16 screens, printing down what they saw in the database. We'll talk about the environment again. And then for substitute service, and we have a lot of people, a lot of teachers start their career as a substitute teacher. To do that, it involved going into a calendar and putting in to an Excel spreadsheet on a calendar format if the teacher worked in those days. So you print down what their service history was, and then you input it in manually to this. So I have seen people, it can take anything up to a few days, a few hours to a few days. I have seen people print down many pages and then sit there very diligently and put that into an Excel spreadsheet. So that's the background to where we were. So something had to change. A bit like Marianne said earlier, we have no choice. We just had to move forward. So cosmically, around that time, RPA became a buzzword. And I might be a manager and a leader in the unit, but I'm a relative Luddite. So I saw RPA floating around as government policy, encouraging us all to get involved. And thankfully and cosmically also, in came the innovation funding from Deeper. So we kind of married the two together, and that's, as I said, that was about 3 years ago. And we made the application, were successful, and that allowed us then to get involved in RPA, which has completely transformed our pension processing.
That's amazing. I think I can speak from a little bit of experience in this. I'm seconded from Garrihy, and I worked in finance. And every month we would get 800 claims in from Gardaí every month. Attached to it every single certificate to validate the overtime, and the stack of paper was immense. And only when I started towards the end of my time there, we started kind of going down this route, and I could already see the tangible benefit immediately as soon as we kind of took those steps. So kind of then, you spoke about RPA. Can you tell us a little, like there's a lot of kind of misconceptions about kind of what RPA is, and people have different ideas as to what it is, and a bit of fear. Not to say it's just because it's a little bit unknown, because again, for so long we've done one thing, and all of a sudden, oh, this computer is coming in to do this, and my job, and oh, what does this mean? So can you break it down for us a little bit what actually is RPA and what it's not?
Absolutely, and again, I knew nothing about RPA. Before I heard it was government policy. I had heard a little bit about it, but never looked under the bonnet because, as I said, it's not my thing. I'm a Luddite. I suppose essentially RPA is a piece of software that works 24/7, doesn't take any breaks, doesn't go on any type of leave, and never makes mistakes. It does exactly what you want it to do. So I suppose I brought a slide to show you maybe what RPA is not, because I think that's as important as what RPA is. So what RPA is not is a walking, talking robot. And I suppose that's part of the fear. Why would we get involved? We don't need robots sitting in the section. So it's not a walking, talking robot. It's not a physical machine that's processing our paper documents. You know, it's not a tangible element. As I said, it's essentially just a piece of software. And it's not artificial intelligence. Marianne mentioned that there. It's not artificial intelligence. It's not as intelligent as that. It's not voice recognition. So what it is, keeping it simple, is a piece of software that allows for the automation and optimization of processes. And particularly processes like the ones I outlined, which are very repetitive, very low-hanging fruit. You go from A to B. So it is a software that allows that to be automated.
Yeah, and like it's a total shift, I suppose, in approach as well. And you spoke very, very clearly kind of about the benefits of it. How did staff react on the ground? Because RPA would actually have to feed in very well, have to be supported by change management really prominently, because you're coming in, you have an idea, it's like, oh, my work, is it not as good as what a robot does? You have these thoughts, and to an extent it's logical, but kind of how did you go about kind of getting people on side and get them to buy into tangible benefits that RPA could offer pensions in the Department of Education?
Yeah, you're so right. I suppose, again, like really good people, really bad systems, I think everyone knew something had to give, and particularly for the people who were working on the customer service element. And they were on the front line getting the calls from the people who weren't happy that we weren't meeting their demand, and they were legally, like I said, entitled to this statement. We were prioritising people who were due to retire. So I think everyone knew something had to change, but your point is well made, because it was a quantum leap to suddenly start trusting a system that would involve a lot of work to set it up. So it's a bit like spend to save financially. You also were spending to save time. There's a lot of time investment. So while I say we've come out the other end now, we piloted RPA in the Department of Education, and the pilot is over, and thankfully it was successful. But it could have gone the other way. And you were also asking really good people who were in the middle of a busy season of retirements to take some time to stand back and talk through. Deloitte were the people through the government framework. They're the only people on the framework for RPA. And they had to sit with our team, and that's what we did with the funding, was we employed Deloitte. They had to sit with our team and literally step through every step of the work that they did. So it was a huge time investment, Eoin. So I suppose we had to keep motivating people, keep reminding them of the goal and where we were going and why we were going there, and that ultimately we would have a better customer service and a better working experience for the staff in the section, even when we had the job done, because Deloitte did put in the processing of robotics, and it's still a journey. We've started and we've made significant gains, but even when that was done, the good people in Athlone still wanted to double check what the bot was doing, because they were so conscientious. And even at that stage, you had to stand back and say, no, the bot never makes mistakes, the bot's as good. So it's a huge cultural, and it's a trust thing, and you're asking people to take the trust.
Yeah, look, it's not easy, and that takes time as well, and you have to prove your success before, I suppose, people will get buy-in. And you're right, that pilot model, I was a pilot myself, and we had to prove that what we're doing is more efficient and yields more accurate, and everything and the rest that comes along with that. And just where we're still on the area of kind of getting buy-in, this will kind of fall into the area of kind of future skills. in a sense too, and kind of workforce planning for the future as well, and what skills we might need kind of going forward. Was there kind of training required? How did kind of staff on the ground get along with that? Was it easy to kind of amalgamate it into their ordinary working?
Yeah, so there were a couple of bits to that, Owen. I suppose, as I said, the subject matter experts, there's a whole new jargon comes with this. So the subject matter experts, the COs and the EOs had to sit, as I said, with Deloitte to build the bot. We're lucky that we have also great staff who have an IT capacity to help to build the bot and to help to manage the bot and maintain the bot. So like I said, we were the pilot in the department. So now we have a plan and we have a paper done as to what it will look like going forward. So you're right, the staff that we trained on maintaining RPA were subsequently promoted and moved on. So then we had to start all over again. John Ray is with me here today, and John, fortunately, is still with us. And he's the brains behind the technology for the RPA. So there is a bit of training. There was a lot of training to be done. And then, as I said, there was a bit of trust. So a bit of A and a bit of B. But what it has realised for us is we've saved 20 minutes per processing time of 40. So we've literally cut it in half. And that's only just the beginning in what we've done already. And if we multiply that by, like I said, there's 140,000 on our payroll. Half are in the pre-2013 scheme, and half are in the post-2013 scheme. So the service history only relates to the people in the pre-2013 scheme, and that's the majority of people coming to retirement age. So it saved 20 minutes on each service history processing, and if you multiply that by the 55,000, even just to be quite generous about it, that's 1.1 million minutes, that's 3,000 days, and that's 12 working years in 1 year. So 12 working years is hugely significant. Marianne and I were chatting earlier about what we've done with that time, but we're still playing catch-up. We're still playing catch-up on all the requests we have in and so on. But ultimately, in a couple of years' time, that'll certainly come back and pay dividends. So back to your question, we had to train people, we had to invest time as well as money. But I think the team then saw the benefits, and therefore we're pushing an open door after that.
No, it's great to know that kind of that there's a dual approach to it too, and that look, it's all well and good to say, yeah, this is going to work. Here are all these fantastic numbers, blah 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 blah. But if you don't get buy-in on the ground, you're really kind of you won't get off to a good start effectively with that anyway. And kind of just even like the numbers there, and you're talking about the volume of all this. I think like there's efficiencies in time, but it's more sustainable. Kind of, we're kind of moving into a green space where we have to be more digital in how we provide our services, and kind of moving away from paper base. And I have nightmares from my time in the guards. I count claims when I go to sleep. Was this a conscious part of your plan to kind of have to be greener as well as more efficient in time and cost?
Absolutely, Owen. So in parallel with, as I said, all the processing and all of the work that we had to do, the floor in Athlone is nearly coming down with paperwork. We have so many files all around us. In fact, we were looking for more storage, and we spent a fortune sending files to mid-freight. Because bear in mind, like my earlier screen, we print down from a database all of that detail. We put it onto a file, and then we put it back in. So this year alone, in addition to all of the other benefits and the reduction in time saving, I think there's been 22% reduction in the toners that we've used in the printers. And as I said, it'll only just grow and grow from there. So there's loads of wins. And as I said, there's no storage. So it's like a domino effect. Once we started doing it in the section, the domino effect is moving. We won't need the storage. We'll have better customer service, better customer experience, and people will go quicker from salary to their pension. So it's win-win. As I said, it's been great. We've only just begun. We haven't used the full capacity of the bot yet. And as I said, we have a whole load of plans for it. So it's very exciting.
That's brilliant, and kind of you're probably trying to scale up within your own organisation before going out, and kind of that feeds into kind of this question here. Is like, do you believe that other public service bodies could benefit from the same approach using RPA, whether it's for pensions, whether it's for payments? So you believe that this could be transferred out to other?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, we work very closely with our colleagues in payroll, but in the pensions alone, all of the public sector pension schemes pre-2013 are based on your service. So we certainly can transfer our learnings out to everybody else. So that's very exciting. That's something that's transferable. Our colleagues in payroll talk about, for instance, the cycle to work scheme would be ripe for robotics. So again, we're reaching out to them, and their experiences can be shared with all of the state payrolls. Like I said, we're the largest payroll in the state. So if we implement something through our RPA, it's certainly transferable.
That's great to hear, and that's one of the kind of central tenets of the fund, is that you can prove transferability and scalability. For those who are looking to apply this year, there's a significant kind of weight towards proving that. So obviously, if you can prove that, it lends very well to your application and certainly improves its possibility of kind of making its way through to funding. Actually, finally, I might just end on kind of, again, RPA, we're in the space of you're proving it works, benefits public servants as well as end users. But for those who are still hesitant to kind of go down this route and kind of, no, we stick to paper, whatever it be, it works, we've done this for so long, we don't need to change. What would you say to them to encourage them to embrace emerging tech one, but specifically RPA in this context?
I would just say go for it. Like I said, I'm a Luddite, relatively speaking, you know, and I didn't even know what RPA was, but I knew enough to know that something had to give, something had to change. We had no choice, and we took that quantum leap. So I suppose it's having the confidence to know that with a bit of leadership and with motivation and so on, take that leap of faith and have trust maybe in the systems, have trust in the team. We had great support. I see John O'Donoghue there. We had great support from Deeper in scaffolding us to go through. I liked the comment earlier that if you fail, you know, that you have to be prepared. We did not know if RPA would work. And we had a couple of wobbles along the way, and we were just fortunate that it did. But if it didn't, we were going back to the drawing board to do something else. So I suppose that's what I'd say to encourage people, that RPA is, now that I know a little bit more about it, it's very successful, and it suits so many of our processing right across the public sector. I know Forsa had an article in their magazine maybe 2 or 3 years ago where they supported the work, and it's like getting people to do more interesting jobs. Who needs to be inputting data and printing down sheets from 9 to 5? So my word of encouragement would be just go for it.
That's great. Just go for it. Absolutely. Thank you very much for your contribution today. Actually, really, really appreciate it. Next, we're going to move on to Dr. Joe Garrihy from Maynooth University. His project, Unlocking Potential, Developing a Fair Approach to Higher Education Applicants with Criminal Records, received €25,000 in 2020. So, Joe, as long as your mic's on, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your project.
There we are. So thanks very much. It's great to be here, number one, and apologies, I am a lecturer by trade, so I couldn't resist having slides, but I'll be brief and we can have a chat about it then. So yeah, I am chair of a project called the Unlocking Potential Project, which is a partnership between Maynooth University School of Law and Criminology. Is it this? Sorry. See if that does it? Thank you. Okay. All right. Apologies. Too many pieces of technology on the go at once. Wouldn't be the first time I was accused of that. So this is a partnership with Maynooth University School of Law and Criminology, the Maynooth University Access Plan, and MyLab Design Thinking at Maynooth. And what we're really looking at is breaking down barriers for people with criminal convictions to access higher education in Ireland and support them when and if they are submitted. So, as I said, the reason that we are doing this is because we, as a criminologist by trade, I am well versed in the impact of stigmatization and barriers that are placed upon people who have criminal convictions. And we really face this in our work in the university, but also in other areas of our research, such as employment and so on. So the problem we faced was these barriers and how we were going to go about trying to break them down. The project was funded by the Public Service Innovation Fund 2020, and it really sought to bring a broad group. We talk about partnership and collaboration, but we really use design thinking from early on to say, who do we need on this project? Who do we need to make this happen? So I mentioned the partners in Maynooth, but also we brought in the Irish Prison Service, the Probation Service, the Pathways Centre, which is a post-release education centre, and the Irish Penal Reform Trust. This really came from another project that was funded by the Public Service Innovation Fund in 2019, which was the Mountjoy Maynooth Partnership. So this was really about developing pathways from people who are currently confined in Mountjoy Prison to university and higher education, including various things, bringing in the Gashka Award, bringing in programs such as Story Exchange and so on and so forth. The Maynooth University has a long history of accessible education, and indeed they were the first, or we were the first university to name prisoners and former prisoners, a term I'm not great about, but we'll work on that, as a priority group for participation. So, you know, the bedrock had been set, and we had to see about developing and innovating and pushing this forward. And this kind of builds on some work that had been done in the UK, such as the Unlock organisation, who tried to have a fair admissions pledge, but also massive organisations in the United States, such as Ban the Box, which seeks to remove that criminal convictions question from job applications and so on. So, briefly, why change? Sorry, I've gone ahead there. Why change? I'll be very brief on this, but ultimately, when we look at it, when we look at the research, where there are restrictive policies for people with criminal convictions, asked to disclose at entry, asked to disclose at registration, there is no evidence to say that makes campuses any safer. But there is overwhelming evidence to say that it operates as a chilling effect on people and stopping them from applying in the first place. So this is very difficult to measure, of course, but we also are building a project, and I'll mention that in a minute, of how to measure that. But another aspect, another lever for change is really a legal point of view, and we are quite confident that those who have policies do not, apologies, I've locked this, but anyway, we'll move on, do not satisfy GDPR. So therefore, you know, I don't need to say too much about that. That's a law that requires satisfaction. And also, the final and perhaps the key point is that we talk about diverse communities, diverse society, diverse public sector, but having people with diverse backgrounds in our classrooms, in our employment, is not just about social justice or vocational altruistic approaches. It's about untapping potential that is there. And I can speak from personal experience where people who have perhaps had convictions are some of our best students, some of our most engaged students, and massively contribute to the intellectual curiosity and the diversity of our classrooms. This is briefly what the website looks like. So everything we sought to do was really to develop a toolkit. Apologies, I've lost the toolkit. To develop a toolkit on house our project on that. And what that includes is, as you can see, a student portal and a HE admin portal. In a sense, the student, what it has is principles. How do we approach people with convictions? How do we manage that area, and how do we do it in a fair way? How do we encourage people to apply for jobs and education, specifically in our case, and how do we support them while they're in it? Of course, we want this to be scalable, as I mentioned. And this is why we developed a fair admissions policy template. So the template is there. Other HEIs can take that template, fit it to their own institution, or indeed public sector more broadly, and use that to guide their work. Also, we built the project around scalability and transferability, because as the Innovation Fund pushes in the application form, we said that how do we step outside our own horizons? How do we see beyond the education's point of view? And so the policy, the GDPR, the principles, and the information around Garda vetting, all of that is imminently transferable to other organisations, employers, and so on and so forth. I won't have time, obviously, to show or play any of the podcasts, but all of that is housed on the website as well. So please go on the website, watch the documentary, because a lot of this, I was really interested about the fact that you were talking about the bot, and the bots don't make mistakes and so on, and that's really interesting. But when it comes to this stuff, a lot of it is about hearts and minds and perceptions and, dare I say, prejudices in certain cases. So I challenge you to watch the documentary or listen to the podcast and not change your thinking or change all of our thinking on this topic. What we want it to be scalable. Our aim is to have this as the approach by all HEIs in Ireland. Ireland is a small country. This is doable. You know, we can. There are a small number of higher education institutions and universities, and they can and should change their policy. What we're trying to do is bring about that. As I said, we thought about not just people. I'm a criminologist. The MAP office, the Access Education office, people who might work in social sciences. They might encounter people who have different lived experiences, but we wanted to include people across the public sector or even in our own institutions who might teach maths or might teach science, who never deal with people who may have lived experience or may not enter into their thinking. So our approach was to make it a transferable and accessible project that people can use these resources for themselves. Briefly, and I will stop, just the impacts. There's always known and unknown impacts. The first, impact is always hard to measure. And in some ways, the unknown impacts are hard to measure because the numbers of students who don't apply are never easily measured. But they're really at the heart of the whole design innovation thinking around this. How do we access those people? How do we sow that seed and broaden their perspectives that maybe I can go to university or higher education, or even take the step to go to further education and build their pathway. We're building an empirical project at the moment to talk to stakeholders and try and understand the policymakers and the people with lived experience, the service users, the end users, as you mentioned. In future, there will be massive efficiencies in the fact that the bureaucracy around these processes is often quite labour intensive, but also, we would argue, unnecessary and fairly futile. Now, we might be a victim of our own success in this because obviously in the future people won't have to disclose as and when needed, so therefore we won't know. But we're happy to take that when it comes to that. In terms of known impacts, the toolkit was launched by Minister Harris in January 2020, and it is available on unlockpotential.ie. And really what it is Trevor Vaugh, who is also involved in the Public Service Innovation Fund, was a core member of our team. He's from my lab in Maynooth. And the design innovation didn't just start at the beginning. It was really part of this website that I showed you. And how do we access, how do we provide a transparent resource that all higher education can use, but also public sector more broadly. And that is an ongoing juggernaut that we want to keep going and keep going. We've also sourced €100,000 per annum as a pilot Kickstart scholarship, which again is part of our partnership with the Working to Change Social Enterprise Public Service Fund, which partners with the Probation Service. So we talk about impacts and knowing the money in people's pockets, and specifically people with convictions who are entering higher education is a key demonstrable impact of this. And also the other impacts, such as our outreach and negotiation with support really of higher education institutions who are looking to incorporate the Kickstart Scholarship, looking to reform their own policies. And briefly, I'll talk about the next steps, and that's really just the study I mentioned about getting stakeholders, policymakers in the room with people with lived experience, with registrars, with people who do Garda vetting and so on, and designing a policy that suits each organisation accordingly. The wheels of change aren't always as fast as we like. We need to complete the policy change within Maynooth, but there is a working group developed specifically to do that. And also engage with the public sector more widely, and that's why events like this I think are very key to talk to people with different skills, different subject matter expertise as a term that I'll be stealing, but I will finish there because I realise we want time for questions.
Thank you very, very much. Once again, I'm a very proud Maynooth graduate after listening to that. It's fantastic to see that Maynooth's at the forefront of ensuring fair access to education. It's wonderful to see. As I was saying, so Maynooth is obviously very progressive in this approach. Has the reaction been similar from other higher education institutions in Ireland as well, similar to Maynooth?
It's patchy, I would say that, but I don't think that's against people involved. I think that universities, much like we talked about, public sector in general, can be massive institutions, and there can be agents for change in different parts of that, but it's about joining up, and that's why, you know, we have so many internal and external partners in the project. So where the new project is seeking to progress that, so people are interested, but it's about the institution as a whole coming together and not having pockets of momentum here and there. I always say that money talks and is a great lever for these things. So the Kickstart scholarships, which are funded through the Dormant Accounts Fund and administered by ourselves through the MAP office, but partnered with the Probation Service, draws a lot of interest from other institutions, and people want to see what can be done in this space. But of course, it's important to not just gain a scholarship and give access to people without the supports and policies in place to welcome and support those people.
Yeah, and you mentioned there the Kickstart Scholarship Fund. So how did the kind of the Public Service Innovation Fund feed into kind of that taking off at Maynooth University?
Well, it was central informally and formally. As I mentioned, the Unlocking Potential project was an outgrowth of the Mountjoy Prison Maynooth partnership, both funded by the Public Service Innovation Fund. And really, we see the educational part of this as part of the same jigsaw, because we talk about employability for all our students, but employability is a massive issue for people with convictions as well. So therefore, we joined with the Working to Change organisation initiative that is government supported, and it was really through the employment, the education and the development of this project that gave us the kind of expertise, the knowledge and the kind of toolkit to put a case forward that we were primed and ready to administer and support these scholarships. So without the Public Service Innovation Fund and the design thinking element of it, we never would have gotten to a point where a Kickstart scholarship would have been supported. And the final point I'll make on that is that something I meant to put on the slides. We talk about failure and iterations. The slides had a few iterations also. But one of the key impacts of this was that we put the case forward that people with convictions should be included in the new National Access Programme. So again, that brings a lot of clout. That brings a lot of institutional awareness and support. And again, the Kickstart scholarships wouldn't be in place without that.
That's great, and even just in kind of you're saying there about your point there, and even just talking about language and how kind of phraseology around this is very important too, to kind of remove discrimination, and that we have a fair and balanced understanding of experiences. I like that you mentioned the podcast. I think that's quite novel, I suppose, in this sense. Like you can get so much data, I suppose, from a quantitative approach of this. So it's equally as important for you to have a qualitative approach to this project to capture the real life experiences of these people in addition to whatever other data you accrued.
100%. You know, I've heard a lot today, and rightly so, about end users or service users or different terminology, but ultimately the people with lived experience of convictions are at the heart of this project. So it would be impossible and improper to do a project without people's input. So from the design point, you know, some of those design thinking workshops we had at the very start of this included people with lived experience of imprisonment and or convictions, but also to integrate that throughout the project. And you know, we, as I mentioned, we want to develop a diverse society, but we can't attempt to do that in the abstract. We have to ask people what is their experience, what is the supports that they need. I mentioned earlier on that some of the people some of our students who've come through all sorts of adversity, including criminal convictions, and often this is intersectional deprivations that are at play, are incredible people and incredibly resilient. But I suppose our point is that you shouldn't have to have that level of resilience to succeed in higher education or our society, that the supports and opportunities should be available and presentable to people in all sections. And this is just a key part of trying to do that, including how we use language, you know. I mean, the policy, as I said, in Maynooth says prisoners and former prisoners, but as someone whose research mainly focuses on prisons, I find it hard to stop using the word prisoner, but I'm trying to change and say people with experience of imprisonment. But, you know, so it's not about trying to catch people out, it's about just all moving in the same direction at the best pace we can.
Yeah, look, and that's an iterative approach in itself. That's not a straight line. Trying to get people to understand the experience is very important in addition to all this data. So podcast, I hope, is going a long way in kind of sharing those stories and helping people understand. It's wonderful to see the fund being used in such a meaningful way, kind of trying to break down barriers to education. So I applaud your efforts anyway, Maynooth University. Very proud to be a graduate. Next up, we have Caitríona Gleeson, who is the CEO for Women for Election. They received €45,000 in 2022 to develop a Women in Politics data hub. Now, this project was partnered with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. Caitríona, would you like to tell us a little bit about kind of how the project came about and kind of what's its ultimate goal?
Yeah, I suppose I'm going to cast you back 100 years ago, and we talk about design, and unfortunately women weren't designed into the political system in Ireland. We were designed out of it, particularly with our constitution in 22 and 37. So Women for Election was established 10 years ago to help design women back in. And essentially what we do is we unlock the doors to the chambers of government locally, nationally and in Europe for women who have an interest in stepping forward and getting involved in politics. And I came into the organisation in 2020, late 2020, and having worked in social change, culture change initiatives for over 20 years, particularly in the gender space, I'm really clear about women being seen in the picture. And one of the things that I was looking at was, if you can imagine the equivalent of the Excel folders in academics boxes around various universities and within the Department of Housing and Local Government and within ourselves, there was no visual, clear set of data around where women are in politics in Ireland. And the other thing that was happening was, can you hear me okay with the speaker? Yeah? The other thing that was happening was that when I speak with people around the problem that we have, and the problem we have at the moment is that there's 23% of TDs in the Dáil are female, and they're all white, settled women of Irish descent. So the other and that means we've got 77% of the seats in the Dáil are occupied by men who are actually all white, with the one exception in terms of ethnicity, and they're generally of a gender of an age category that's in an older demographic, but that's changing. When you take that to local government, and if you can move outside of Dublin, what I could see when we started to look at the data very clearly is that you're looking at one woman or two women or three women in our local chambers around most of the country. And so the decisions that are being made about us all on a daily basis, and particularly I think amplified in the pandemic, are missing, as the Minister said earlier, not just because it's right to have women at the table, we're missing the minds and the power of diversity. So that's what we're working to change. But to make that case, having a visible data set and one that maps Ireland in a very dynamic way was the gap that we identified. So I was also naturally collaborating with all of the excellent political scientists who were in the space of women in politics and getting more women in politics. So, and through conversations could see that there was all this great data, but it was sitting in their Excel sheets or in their publications, which were behind walls for the rest of us. So I approached one of the academics, Dr. Claire McGing, who's formerly Maynooth and now at IADT, and she signposted me back to Maynooth, actually, to the AERU project, to the All Ireland Research Observatory, and I got engaging with with Justin Gleeson there. And Eru have recently developed the data hub for COVID, so we all know what the COVID data hub looks like. We were very familiar with it. And so we had this is only like November 2021 last year. So we had a very quick engagement. He could see what we had, what our challenge was, but also Eru. Not only do they do data hubs really well, but they also are in the social, political, cultural, demographic space. So they bring all of the social demographics together, and they're unique in Ireland in terms of doing that. So I was in contact then we worked very closely with the Department of Housing and Local Government unit, the gender unit there, with Louise Purcell and Owen Cailíry. And Louise, we were having a conversation, it was December, and I said, look, this is a project, like we'd love to have a mapping of data, and not just historically and not just contemporary, but as we move towards the local elections in 2024, it's a strategic mapping we want to be able to see. And as Women for Election are trying to drive the ambition that by 2030 we'll achieve 50-50 in our parliaments locally and nationally. So it's a very ambitious agenda, but to do that, data is quite critical. So having a map, for me being able to see, and for the team in Women for Election, and then for the department and for others, being able to, and the political parties, being able to see where women are running, where they've been selected, and then and how we're meeting the targets. And so for us, the data targets are actually, when have you reached success? So in terms of success here, when we can see that in the local electoral areas that the CSO data for diversity is met in terms of the reflection in the local chambers, then we know we've reached success. So that's 52% in terms of women generally, and then various demographics across male and female. So Louise was fantastic. Louise said, actually, there is a fund open. If we could turn something in the next week, we might throw it in. So we did. And I suppose it was the project and the speed at which we've delivered and are close to completing the project is really an example of right place, right time, and right people, and a real need. So there has been great synergy. So we started the project once we got the grant in March, April this year, and what we've been doing is building a collaboration. So Eru and ourselves partnered with the department, and now we've brought in all of the academics. We invited everybody who was relevant in the space. So we've had this fantastic collaboration, and hopefully the Department of Equality are coming on board shortly with us as well, and Ordnance Survey Ireland now have also come into the mix. So it's just been this really powerful, magical kind of dynamic space where we've been in the archives of franchise in housing, where the TypeScript PDFs, it wasn't even a word typed PDF, those data sets, so we have been now transposed into Excel, into data sets that now Eru are turning into mapping for us. So we've probably opened up something that's bigger than what we started, which is quelle surprise. At the end of November, we will have the first phase of the data hub ready, and we're looking to launch that in February. But what we've identified now is there's lots of potential, lots of interest, and lots more to do with it. So it's quite good.
Yeah, and I know even a conversation before now that you said you haven't published yet. So without going kind of too deep into the data, can you give us some of your insights, kind of having analysed the data thus far? Kind of what are your key insights from having looked at the data?
Well, I was actually, a new colleague started last week with us, and I was showing her some of the stuff, and she was already saying, look, I wonder what happened there. So we've got data sets now, particularly Dr. Claire McGing and Dr. Lisa Keenan from Trinity have the data sets of local government back to 2014, but they have the general election data sets back to 1992. So there has been, just in terms of what data we have, there was no data of online available of a gender breakdown on local government ever. So now we're looking in terms of local councillors. By the end of, we have now transposed over to Excel, back, like it's translated data now, we'll have back to 1985. Whether we can get all of that up onto the hub in this iteration is a resource issue. But what we'll be able to see is a picture of women and men in politics. So I came back in September after a short break, and I saw the first iteration of the hub, and I've known the data, and I do data quite well, as you can probably tell already, and I was struck by how stark it was. So if you imagine a map of Ireland, And where dark green is where we're getting to about 40% in local government, you're only talking about Dublin and some parts of Kildare, Wicklow and Galway that have reached that in local government. When we look at the map in terms of the history of women in terms of the National Parliament in the Dáil, I'm a very proud, maybe overly attached Clare woman and Munster blood that shows very passionately when the rugby games are played. Anyway, in Munster 101 years ago, we had 4 women in the Dáil representing the entire province of Munster. Today, in the Dáil, we have 4 women representing the entire province of Munster out of 43. And so I've been telling that story, but when you see that story up and it's facts, like that's really, really harsh. But what we can see then with the hub is we can go back and look at the candidates and how many female candidates there were running. And actually within Clare in 1997, there was a higher number of female candidates running than there was in the last election. So there's all these questions. Even yesterday we're looking at, there was quite a dip in candidates running between 2007 and 2011. And we're going, is that because women were more time poor with recession? You know, so these are the questions we're asking. One of the things that we can see very clearly now, it's really mapped out, and Dr. Buckley in Cork worked very closely, in UCC in Cork worked very closely with Justin over the summer on mapping how effective quotas it can be. So you can now see very clearly, like we're talking 1921, 6 women. Our first real jump was 1992 to 20 women, and the bounce there was from President Robinson in 1990. And then you're seeing the next jump up then in 2016. So what happened in 2016 is we had the quotas in. So you can see that, and that was jumped up to 36 women or 35 women. So you're looking, we've stagnated again, but the quotas are coming in higher next year. We're going to go to 40%. So I know there's a lot of in-house kind of data in front of you here. But so we're getting to see. So I suppose for us, the main driver for Women for Election was being able to communicate the problem, to get the buy-in, to get the understanding. Because Ireland at the moment is 100th in the world in terms of its performance around women in politics. On the Gender Equality Index. In other areas, we're performing much better than other countries. We're the 7th lowest in Europe. So this is, you know, for us, it's getting us back up the policy agenda, knowing how critical to achieving gender equality in Ireland it is to actually tackle this area where we have a huge deficit, but also how critical it is to reaching our potential in terms of government decision making, both locally and nationally. So there's, as you can hear, I'm quite enthusiastic about it. There's loads of potential, and but then from the academics perspective, it's a huge tool in terms of learning, a learning resource in terms of political science. From the department, who've been really central to making this happen, it's a case for them to be able to make cases both into the coffers, back deeper again, but also in terms of being able to monitor progress as well, because there's a lot of initiatives coming on board now the department have been leading with Minister Burke. So it's how we can map going forward, and I'm quite into the mapping tool that we're designing for the 2024 elections, if it works, and if we can trust that women were really selected into the seats and we're not being fed false data. This will allow us, like our plan on that is that we'll have, like, you know, whatever we're setting targets for each area built on their 2019 data for each local electoral area. And so we've all of the candidate data there, and we're targeting candidate numbers. So we're looking to double the candidates in most of the areas as the target. So like I'm on local radio, or I'm down in Offaly as I was last week and I am tonight, and we're able to really like give them data locally and say, look, you had 8 candidates the last time, we need to reach we need to get 18, so we need an extra 10 women running in the next elections, and then you won't have 1 woman out of 19 will hopefully get closer to 50%. So that's the kind of that's how it's working.
There's no question, there's a lot of passion behind this project. I think that's fantastic, and a lot of time that's the difference that gets these projects over the line, is people behind who are very impassioned. Can I ask you, you were talking just about the tool itself, and then because we talk about being scalable, and particularly Women for Election within this context of the fund is quite unique, and that's a not-for-profit who's partnered with the department to get the project over the line. So can you talk about just a little bit, do you think that this project specifically, or the tool, would be scalable to other public service bodies? I know you mentioned Ordnance Survey, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so the tool itself.
So what's come on board since we've got involved, and this is all over to Justin in Eru, is that because of the work that Eru were doing and all of the relationships they have, our little organisation over here and the work we're doing that we're trying to mainstream is getting more attention. So Ordnance Survey Ireland, under their Sustainable Development Goals obligations, are seeing this as an opportunity to get good, solid data in. So they're coming on board, and so we'll be able to use the GeoHive platform on that. So I think I would expect that, like, being able to set targets around diversity and having that, bringing that synergy of census data and then the local data together, I think that's quite a good model. So I think that's very transferable in all, even in areas that Joe's working in there. I think the potential in terms of the academic space is there's lots of research questions to come out of, there's, like, literally there's PhDs coming out left, right and centre out of the data that's rising. And I think for the departments then, I suppose being able to feed in accurate data into the international organisations that there's obligations around, so that's going to fast track that. But we're in conversations now with the Department of Equality in terms of their obligations under an EU directive and how that's going to, they now have, like, we're very poor on data on gender in Ireland, so this is actually, it's probably one of the easiest data sets to access. I've worked in gender-based violence previously, and it's much harder to pull data out there. But we have work to do then, like, and I don't think it's necessarily be Women for Election doing with the potential of the department to, like, we're not collecting data on politicians' demographics, so we can't actually get beyond gender at the moment. And even to get to gender, it involved having to go through, like, I was helping one of the parts of the project, I was in the Tuam local council election, or council minutes, to find out who Theo Buil was, in terms of gender. So we were having to identify based on name and research, where there was any doubt on name. So that sort of disaggregated data going forward is really important.
But it's great to show that even the most niche of projects per se can still be quite transferable if we break it down into its component parts. Thank you very much for that, Caitríona. Not at all. It's great to see that there are so many passionate teams behind these projects. It's really wonderful, and collaboration with the department is very novel in this as well. So it goes to show you that you don't have to be straight of the mill public service body to get projects over the line.
Right.
And our final speaker, Carmel O'Hare, now Director of Corporate Services and Innovation at Monaghan County Council, received funding in 2021 for the My Cocoa project for €35,000, and her team won the Future Tech Challenge in 2021, where they received €100,000 worth of services from Amazon Web Services. So my first question, Carmel, is how do you do it?
I've got a great team around me. I won't take full credit myself, but I have a great collaboration working with Monaghan.
And just that picture shows you just the sheer breadth of collaboration at this project. It's phenomenal. Can you tell, for people who don't know about My Cocoa, can you just give us a little synopsis as to what it's about?
Yeah, so My Cocoa is, the vision for My Cocoa is that it is an all-of-government, local government platform that all local authority services can be available to customers securely and online. So what we've done is we've built an online portal, and like local authorities provide over 1,000 services, from anything from parking permits, grave permits, scaffolding licenses, applications for housing loans. There's just so many of them, and they're so complex and vary. But this platform allows us then to develop each of those services and just slot them into the platform, and the citizen can then access them all from one place. One universal experience for the citizen. They have an app on their phone, and they can log in and register in My Cocoa, and they can access whichever local authority they wish. So I'll give you an example of that. For example, a business customer, a rate payer, before My Cocoa, they would have had to deal with several local authorities individually, and they'd have a different experience depending on, say, in Monaghan, they might get, we might issue rate demands, we might issue ours in January, it could be February or March before they get them in Cavan. Not that they're behind us, I wouldn't like to say that. But even then, to pay their rates, they might, for Monaghan, we would have had an online system that they can pay online. In other local authorities, that doesn't exist. So the idea of My Cocoa is that the business can register there, and they can now pay their rates and see their accounts across multiple local authorities, in the one experience. So that kind of is the idea of the platform, yeah.
It's a brilliant idea, and I think you captured it really well. That lots of time there are different approaches to these things. Even try to harmonise it across local authorities is a challenge, and certainly one worthwhile for the end user. Look, again, coming back to that picture, it just shows you the sheer breadth of collaboration involved. How on earth did you get all these people to sign on to this project in the first place?
Bribes. No, I tell you how it started was we had a solicitor approached us, and they were given out stink about their experience with local authorities. You know, that it was all paper-based, and it was taken, for example, they'd have a query for was there planning contributions paid on a particular house for a client that wanted to buy the house. That took 3 to 5 weeks to turn around that query using the paper-based. With MyCoco, it's now 24 hours. But just on the collaboration, what I did was we had a network, a very strong network of heads of IS. So we had a regional network. So I went with the idea to the regional network. You know, we've got customers that are willing to work with us. We've got solicitors. We've got the hauliers. They want to work with us to improve the service. I also wanted to get somebody really important, so I went to Barry Lowry. I hope he doesn't mind me name dropping, but I asked him about using the MyGov ID to log in, but I kind of knew if I've got some big hitters like Barry behind the project and I go to my group and say, Barry's behind it, you know, that helps. The citizens are going to work with us. So that's the information I brought to the group, and we had Teams meeting. It was during COVID at the time, so we had our Teams meetings, and I got the 5 in our regional group to join up. There was no risk to them because we were going to put in the application for the Innovation Fund, and if we won it, Monaghan was going to take the lead to develop, and if we didn't win it, then I don't know if it would have proceeded or not. So it really depended on the fund. So we had 5 local authorities, and then what I did was I went to some of the other local authorities in the National Heads of IS group. So we wanted to get a range from, like the Dublins, the big local authorities, the rural, the urban. So I got colleague Stephen Brady in Dunleary Rathdown County Council came on board with us, and that was good to get a Dublin behind it. We got we've Kildare, Carlow, Meath, Galway, Laois, got all of those guys to join in. So we've a great mix. We've 13 local authorities now working on it at the moment. We've also, you'll see, Ascendus, the software developers in the company. They're an absolute fantastic company. They have expertise in AWS. And they work very closely. We would have had a long relationship with Ascendus doing local authority working with us before. We've also then, because of the Future Tech Challenge, we won €100,000 worth of AWS services. So we have MyCoco built and hosted in the cloud. But we meet regularly as a project group, this group, and it's fun. You know, there's a fantastic energy, and we do make excuses to have physical meetings, and away as far as possible from Monaghan. I hope there's nobody listening. Well, we've had a few trips to Sligo, and that's important. The networking and the energy and building that collaboration is all part of the innovation and getting the project over the line.
It's brilliant to know, and so you've proven it this far. Do you envisage it, or do you want to try and expand this out to cover the entire local authority area across Ireland?
We really do. This is vital. We want all customers to have the same universal experience. So if there's anybody listening here from Cork City and County and Limerick and Dublin City and the big local authorities, we would really ask them to come and join MyCoco, because that means that the customers from all over the country are going to have the one experience. It doesn't matter if you live in a poorer local authority area like Monaghan, where we can't afford to deliver all these services on our own. We need the economies of scale, and we do call on the larger local authorities. We'll have the LGMA also. I haven't mentioned the Local Government Management Agency are working with us. The Department of Housing are working with us, and they've indeed given us funding as well to help us develop some of the services. And they're I suppose we're trying to go with the carrot approach, that the more we develop and the cheaper we make the service, the more likely it is that other local authorities will join in with us. But I think if we could get all of the local authorities to join in, then all the citizens, then we would be positioned in Ireland, local government in Ireland, as a leader in the EU, a digital leader, and that's what the country wants to do. We want to be a digital leader in a digital economy. So this would really help us achieve that.
I think that vision is definitely backed up by evidence, and again, it comes back to that: how many of you have proven that this MyCoco is a success?
Yeah.
So it's all evidence based, and you're right, making it that appeal out for others to join you. And it makes the services better for the citizen, which is ultimately all of our jobs.
Yeah.
So finally, you've talked about the success of the HIS, which has been phenomenal and instrumental to the project's success. I might then just finally ask you, so what has been kind of the local authorities, what do they think, the staff themselves think? Has it made their life, their working lives easier? Is their lower kind of, or tasks easier to perform? Was it hard to get buy-in from them?
No. I suppose in Monaghan we have a good culture of innovation. We're an entrepreneurial county, and we call our local authority, we're entrepreneurial. But we have had, no, it's been great. I mean, the staff have said that it makes their job easier. So while we were looking at some of the services, and I'll go back to the solicitor service, when we were looking at that, it was heavily paper-based. So the inquiry would come in post, it would come to a member of staff, and they would just go, oh, Jesus, and they'd sit it in their in tray, and it would sit in the in tray with a cheque attached to it, and they'd put it kind of to the back of the list because they knew they had to go then and look up something, look up maybe a register and look at the data, and then they had to type out a letter, and then they had to frank the letter and send it out. So now the request comes into them through my COCO. It's a task, and they don't have to issue a receipt. It's already paid online. All they have to do then, and it's all template based. So the letter's already written for them, and it pulls in the information for them. It's really, they do a little search and they just sign it off digitally, and the solicitor accesses that letter digitally. So this job has become far nicer. So we knew it would save time, but we had no idea that it would save time because the staff like doing that work now. The experience of that is so much better, yeah.
No, it's wonderful, and I think you're right. This is a proven success, both in terms of staff and for end users. So, as you said, if there are any local authorities who have not yet signed up on today in person or online, please do reach out to Carmel. She would be more than delighted to see more buy-in and to see this project going further, I've no doubt. And so do the rest of those HIS in the picture behind. So I think that I have no idea what time we've come to. I apologise if we've gone on. I want to thank each of the panellists for their contribution. It's fantastic to see that the Public Service Innovation Fund has been used so widely to support a multitude of different projects, different objectives. It just shows how diverse the talent is that we have in the public service and the vision that we have to improve our services. So if we have time for maybe one question, yeah, perfect. If anyone in the audience might have a question that they have for any of the panellists, or if there's anything else. Oh, perfect, yeah. Lady in the front.
Very interested in, hi, Sheena Murphy is my name, from Citizens Information Board, and I was very interested in your discussion in relation to women in politics. And one of the things that comes to mind, now I know it's all data that you're talking about and all the rest of that, but what outside of that are being done to support women in politics? Because the role of, not to be genderising, a woman's role is very different still today in Ireland, in terms of the potential supports, and also in terms of educating men, in terms of supporting women in politics, because I'm sorry, there are a lot of more challenges for, I would see anyway personally, for women in politics than there would be for potentially for other genders.
Are you okay for me to take that? Yeah. It's slightly off-centre from the innovation stuff, but it is innovation what we're doing. So the work Women for Election are driving is two-pronged. One is around changing the culture of politics, and that'll come from two approaches. One is actually working and we work very collaboratively with the political parties and also with the government agencies, particularly the ministries who have responsibilities and their staff, and also with different potential collaborators. For example, we're working more with tech companies, so I'm on the advisory board for Meta on women's safety, particularly women in public life. So doing a lot to look at bringing the lived experience of politicians or women in public life to the tech companies, and basically looking for them to develop better accountability and essentially closing down the bots and the humans that are driving so much amplified abuse online. That is an example. So in terms of the first strand of our work, or one prong of our work, it's around culture change. And so Minister Burke has just announced would you believe, 100 years overdue, and he agrees himself maternity leave for local councillors, which isn't in place yet. And that's equally happening. We worked last year with the Count Corla with an Oireachtas family-friendly forum that brought a lot of experts together. So there's a whole range of, and this is where there's loads of innovative potential solutions as well. Women are time poor. That's one of the biggest barriers. We have a lot of work to do in terms of care responsibility and the equal sharing of that. But the women haven't had, so the Oireachtas Forum, some of the recommendations there are making simple changes in how the Dáil is run. So they're going to be running parallel chambers. So these long hours of being in the Dáil are going to be reduced. It's not good for any of us that people are making decisions at midnight about all of our lives. But there's recommendations in there to look at more connected remote voting hubs, so like we can do our business from anywhere in Ireland. And as a rural person in Ireland, you know, I live in Sligo, so like everything being based in Dublin, as we all know, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. So there's some of the examples. On the other side of our work, it's about that access to politics piece. So Women for Election have been providing bespoke training programs and mentoring programs for nearly 10 years now. Initially, we were dial up, dial down around elections, organisation based on resources. It was a social enterprise that started. Now we've got full-time staffing and we're growing the organisation over the last number of years. So a lot of the supply end of women into politics and that jump from 2011 to 2020 in our data, in terms of like the number of candidates doubled. Some of that was quota-led. A lot of it also was Women for Election-led, where thousands of women have accessed our programmes. The majority of women in the Dáil at the moment and in the Seanad have had some engagement with us in terms of breaking down confidence barriers. Interestingly, still women need to be asked at least 5 times before they go forward. Some of our most prominent leaders had to be asked multiple times. And then also looking at breaking down that culture of not having access to politics. So we're giving literally we're doing campaign 101 to campaign like advanced in terms of how to get your team together, all of that sort of stuff. And then communications, how you sell yourself. So that's the kind of the innovation space we're in terms of what we provide. And then what we want to get is that 30% critical mass. So when you get that critical mass of 30%, then culture starts to change. So we're seeing in the Seanad now that's there, and a lot of things that senators are bringing in are actually very related to women's lives as well, you know, and that's what inspired me into this job, was seeing how senators took on domestic violence and criminalising coercive control, which was the last job I was involved in. If we had been years trying to get men to listen and it wasn't relevant, so it's not going to meet the top of the agenda. So getting that critical mass is key to it.
You're right, and even this week I know we have an event on the 30% Club with KPMG trying to harness diversity as a force for innovation. So you're absolutely right, there is a lot more work to be done. I certainly hope that answers ladies' question anyway. I think we have one more question then. Yeah, at the back.
Yes, thanks very much, Leanne Caulfield, Law Reform Commission. Thanks to the Department and the speakers. So we heard a lot this morning about the importance of the end user focus and citizen focus in the projects and in our innovation. And I'm just wondering from the speakers about the extent to which there was end user consultation before making an application and whether that's important or necessary. So I'm thinking in terms of maybe clerical officers and executive officers in the department, or people with prison experience in the Unlocking Potential project, or indeed women in politics or other local authorities and members of the public who might be making, you know, scaffolding applications or things like that, and the extent to which that engagement might have improved the application, or is it sufficient to engage with the end users post-funding receipt and while you're implementing the project, or should that engagement happen beforehand?
Yeah, I think from the application point of view anyway, proven kind of consultation is only going to improve chances of success. So I would say yes, if you can prove that you have gone out and approached the end user to support your application, it will end well ultimately to being appraised. Now, I don't know if the guys here have anything to say on having done it themselves. Yeah, perfectly, Joe, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. And I mentioned it briefly, but I do think it doesn't get enough focus. So just to give a little bit of background very briefly, so I mentioned that the Unlocking Potential project came out of the Mountjoy Maynooth partnership, but that also originally came out of another project called College Connect, which was not specifically about people with criminal convictions, but about broadening access to higher education for people from underrepresented groups. So that could be people from the travelling community, people from minority ethnic groups, and various different groups. But as part of that project, it meant a qualitative piece of research around the people who were trying to be accessed. But rather than university academics doing the interviewing, my colleague Sarah Sartori and her team trained peer researchers. So it was people from those communities interviewing people from those communities about their needs and what could be done to do so, which led on to the Mountjoy Maynooth and the Unlocking Potential project, which, as I said, had people with convictions in the design process on the team as team members doing different roles and so on, whether it was research or admin or intellectual contributions, whatever the case may be. And I think that feeds into, you mentioned the podcast where I interview 5 people who've been through the system and the documentary. So every facet of this is part of it, and I couldn't say more that it's not sufficient to see it as a post-project approach. And it would only undermine the project from the start, I think.
So in short, yes, is your answer. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions today. Apologies that we've gone over, but look, this is what happens when there is so much passion behind these projects that the conversation can keep flowing. I'm sure we could keep going if we had time to. There was a final slide there, if you can just go back. So just to wrap up, folks, deadline Friday 21st December 2022. There's now, we listened to you guys last year. There's now an application in Word doc format available so that you can download and share internally among your teams before making a finalised application. As we said, €750,000 projects ranging between 25 to 60,000. All the categories are available on our website, and if you happen to need more information or want to discuss potentially applying for the fund, please reach out to our superb Public Service Innovation Fund and Strategy Manager, Mr. Chris Kiernan, who is hiding behind the pillar from me. We are always here to chat, so please never ever hesitate to reach out. On Friday, 21st of December, we look forward to reading all of your applications, and so thanks for joining us today and take care.